Because you don't want a 2008, 2009, right when you're ready to walk out of the office for the last time and got to turn around and walk back in again.
Well, guys, welcome to podcast number 4. We have made it. We're still chugging along. So we kind of want to do a 2-part this time that connect with each other, talking about prepping for retirement. And then next video, we thought we'd move into like estate planning and some different subjects around that, and just give y'all kind of a baseline, because those two things are so complicated and unique to every single situation. It's like, there's 1,000 different solutions for every single person, so.
1,000 solutions for every person?
Okay, you know what I mean.
I gotta get some more training.
Yeah, I think so. But we don't want to spend 5 hours here. We just want to kind of give y'all the 30,000 foot view, and then whatever questions y'all have, obviously y'all can bring those to us, and we can work through those with y'all. One thing that we were talking about before this is kind of an analogy that I like to use. Climbing Mount Everest.
A 30,000 foot level.
Oh, 30,000 foot. Yeah, that's good. Climbing Mount Everest, you want to prep for it, right? But what's everyone's goal when they're climbing Mount Everest?
Get to the top.
Get to the top, right? So everyone plans on getting to the top and getting the proper tools to get to the top. But a lot of times it's the climb down that's really the difficult part. And it's a lot harder to go back and get those tools once you're already at the top than it would be if it just was prepped in the first place. So it's the same thing with retirement, right? Mm-hmm. You get to those 5-ish years around retirement, you want to have things in a proper place, but it's not always the easiest thing to go back and establish something that should have been in place already. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. You're running out of time. Let's talk about 5 years before retirement. What we're seeing here is, and what we are advising on, depending on what retirement looks like, because that's different for everybody, of course. Some people are never going to quit working, but they're not necessarily going to keep working the 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week that they do now. There's a lot of consulting work nowadays with baby boomers retiring and a little bit of a brain drain in the economy. So a lot of these baby boomers and retirees are being hired back on contract basis and fairly attractively to help with these companies that need to train up some of the younger folks as they're coming along. So we see that happening. So there may be income sources in retirement if you choose to keep working. And then of course there's Social Security and there's pensions and stuff like that. So you got to integrate all those things. But with regard to a portfolio, for instance, what you really got to start focusing on 5 years before, 4, 3, 2, is probably backing down the aggressiveness of your portfolio.
Yeah.
Because you don't want a 2008, 2009, right when you're ready to walk out of the office for the last time and got to turn around and walk back in again. And it's happened. We've had clients have that happen to them. So that was a unique situation. That's why they became clients, because they didn't want that to happen again. Anyhow, so you got to start toning down your portfolio a bit relative to your risk tolerance and what you're trying to accomplish during retirement, with the thought in mind that it's still a long-term portfolio. Just because you're retired doesn't mean you shut down the opportunities in that portfolio. It still has to last a good 30 years, hopefully, or more. So you still have to incorporate multiple asset classes to be able to keep up and exceed inflation. But it definitely needs to be part of your strategy of what do I do 5 years before, 3 years before, and then walking into retirement. What should that portfolio look like? What are we asking of it? It now becomes an income portfolio instead of a growth portfolio. What are all the different kind of income tools? There's a lot of different asset classes. Thousands. I am going to have to go back and get some training.
Yeah.
So anyhow, what do you think of that?
Just one thing I wrote down while you were talking, when you were talking about kind of the accumulation years. Not everybody likes to do this. A lot of people earn money differently, right? Some people have the W-2 or the 1099, just the different kind of structures for income. But a lot of what I see when people are like big spenders, right? Some people can't control
themselves.
Yeah, they can't control themselves. So sometimes they'll ask me, or I'll make the suggestion of, why don't we automate some of this, like what you were saying, to make that money almost feel like it's a bill every single month on the 10th, the 15th, whatever. So that way it's like completely out of your hands, so you can't spend it, right? Mm-hmm. If it's out of your hands, if it's not tangible in front of you, easy to spend, it takes some of that out of there. And that's not to say the money's gone. It could still be accessible in some way, but a lot of people like to do that just to kind of take it out of their immediate grasp.
That's why a lot of employers have started the automatic enrollments in 401ks. I have Sometimes I have issues with those kind of things, but it's not a bad idea because you can always stop it. You don't have to do it, but at least it gets you in there and gets it going.
And one other thing I was thinking about with retirement, not only are there a bunch of different kinds of assets to have within those accounts, but there's probably, what do you think, 10, 15 different kinds of
Thousands.
Maybe not thousands, but definitely a good handful of just different kinds of accounts. We're talking Roths, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, and everything in between, pensions.
Deferred comp plans.
Deferred comp, right? So there's just so many different ways to do it. And there's so much information on the phones and on the internet of different ways to do it. It's almost like it's overwhelming sometimes.
And all of them are treated differently going into retirement time. And you don't really pay attention necessarily when you're signing up for those of what the distribution plan is for those. And sometimes there are little surprises in there. For instance, some deferred comp plans.
For sure.
So that also needs to be analyzed as you're getting closer and closer to that point.
And when you're starting out, depending on your career path, right? Because there's just so many ways to do things nowadays. A lot of people's only focus is saving and returns. But within that, there's just so many other aspects that people just don't think to look at because they don't do this every single day, right? I'm talking about, estate planning concerns, taxes, creditor protection, just different things that could happen that you don't plan for, but you want to make sure are covered if they do.
That goes back to your different accounts.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned Roths, so those are after tax but tax-free income. You've got pre-tax 401ks that you get a deduction on the front end or don't pay tax on the front end, but you do on the back end, and there can be a whole set of issues there. You've got non-qualified like brokerage accounts, and mostly they're liquid because these other things that we're talking about, are retirement only type things. But
which
brokerage
they're accessible, but there's fees, taxes, and whatever.
Penalties. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's a good thing to look at too, because you may not retire at 60 or 65. You may retire at 50. So you've got to have a plan for what monies to go to from 50 to 60 when you can start getting those other buckets of money.
And that's going back to what I said earlier about how much information is out there on the internet and how many sources, right? It's almost a double-edged sword. For one thing, it's overwhelming how much there is, and it almost seems like any source that I go to, whatever person is giving the advice, they always say, this is the only way to do it. Never do this. This is bad. This is good. They never acknowledge that there's a lot of gray area in there.
Kind of like politicians.
Yeah, it's like...
Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, but it's like, everything that we do has its place. So it's hard to say, this is never good, this is always good. There's always situations for everything.
That's why it's so important to get a team of advisors. You need a CPA, you need an attorney, and you need your financial planner, financial advisor. It's critical, and that they all communicate to each other. Because they all specialize in their own thing. It's all interdependent. And if you can get that team put together and they will communicate, that's invaluable for you.
Sometimes it's hard to find that, though.
It is very hard to find.
One person in that trio is normally quarterbacking the process.
Who is that usually?
We won't mention it, but, yours truly.
All right, it's a financial advisor. That's usually the one that's doing it. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, and we see more of the holistic picture versus the attorneys are just looking at the legal side, the CPA is just looking at the tax side.
And we need their help to give the best advice.
Yeah, we absolutely do. Yeah, they're very, very needed. So, but yeah, anything else you think that we should hit on in terms of kind of those up-ramp years as... No?
There's 995 other ones, but we can save those for another... podcast.
Oh, cool. So this next video, we're going to move more into the estate planning stuff. So it all kind of works in conjunction with each other, right? But yeah, catch us on the next one.